I cannot call MJ as a local, but then he is also helping out people elsewhere. Manjunath Jyotinagar from UHP Technologies. Um, so, so he has over 30 years of experience in various capacities, and he actually founded, both UHP Technologies and CAST Technologies, which actually makes products, right? So UHP is primarily doing business of constructing, handling gases, particularly for this semiconductor and advanced ecosystem that requires such facilities. But he has founded in 2011 a semiconductor tool manufacturing company as well, right? That builds semiconductor processing tools. So he's basically a chemical engineer from NIT Trichy, and done fantastic things, particularly in this area. And we have been working with UHP for a reasonably long period of time, right? Our facility is a grand example of what we could achieve with our local ecosystem. So not only just in India, UHP is in operational in Singapore, Turkey, UAE, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, right? So they are not anymore local, right? So they used to build things here, but they have gone out and they are making their mark elsewhere in the world. And he's the right person to talk about the constraints that we have in the ecosystem in building such facility and also sustaining that. Welcome, Manjunath.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think supply chain has been part of my longest career history. And it's always nice to talk about supply chain challenges because it's never been free of challenges, supply chain. So in that way, I kind of connect well with the supply chain. So coming back to a bit on the what we do as a company. So we have, can I have the slides, please? So we have two companies under this umbrella, under the umbrella of CAS, and one is into called as UHP Technologies, other is CAS Technologies. So as Professor introduced, we start off as a company doing facilities engineering. Someone who wants to set up a fab in those days called an R&D fab, what is now known as. So they need to find somebody who can design and build a fab. So way back in 2008, that's when we ventured into to design and install facilities for running semiconductor R&D institutions and some of the advanced fabs in those days. And that called for a lot of vigor, courage to set up something in India and also deliver it to the T. Like you can't do something, you were just talking about contamination, right? In a fab and a systems, what we deliver, if there's a contamination, I'm sure some of these notes, what they were trying to do, would never see its life. So that was a big challenge for us at that time. And being a completely new player in the game where we didn't have any expertise of how to build a clean room or gas facilities or treating the exhaust systems or any other facilities that are required for running a efficient fab. So we grew up from there to today a full stack engineering house where do the design, engineering, and constructing such facilities as a complete turnkey. So we have been doing this for a lot of giga-scale solar fabs in the country. And I think the biggest solar fab of 6 giga in one particular site is being done by our company, an Indian company. That's a credit to our existence in this market. And also to talk about on the equipment side, very early when we finished some of the initial installations and engineering deliveries of such fabs, we were challenged by the customers. Look, you guys have done this fine. That's all good. What next? Unless you guys kind of graduate to next level, this is not the industry that you can stay for long. And when we were challenged, that's when we took this kind of situation to our stride and came up with the building equipments. We were pretty good in doing a lot of subsystems for gas handling systems. So that kind of gave us a boost to get on to developing some tools for, and that's when we got into CVD for 2D materials. And of course, can I just go to the next slide, please? So just next one. Other one, please. Next one, yeah. Yeah, so that's how these 6 segments came into existence. So we do a lot of gas delivery systems, chemical delivery systems, and some equipments for 2D material deposition, and some tools for wafer processing as well. Not the chemistry, wet chemistry, it's all plasma based. And then we got into gas purification, because in the semiconductor processes, one of the biggest challenges, as you said, about contamination. And contamination, like molecules of carbon monoxide, oxygen, moisture, hydrocarbons, methanes, any kind of element that you talk about, they in the PPB and PPM levels, they play a very big role. So gas purification is a very, very novel technology which supports, without which I think it's impossible to run any of the semiconductor processes. And then finally, we got into environmental side of it, building. How do we treat this reminiscent gases that comes out of these processes? A lot of these processes have a lot of waste gas that comes out of it. And that's when we got into dry absorption, chemisorption technologies to treat silanes, boranes, diboranes, phosphines, and kind of gases. That's and the interesting part is we could develop this using a local ecosystem. We never had to go out of India to buy any component required to develop these diabsorption or chemisorption technologies. There's one company in Gujarat called Chemi. So we buy these molecules based on our custom design, and then we do the entire equipment per se. So that's where we are. And just to give you a snapshot, we've grown from hardly about 4 people to in the year 1 in 2008, and now we are about 200 people company. And we have 3 manufacturing locations within Bangalore because of space has overfilled. So hence we had to set up 3 different units in the very short radius. That's where we are.
So I think, I just want to follow up on what you mentioned, because you have done business here, right? And you must have had challenges, but then you have done business elsewhere as well. I mean, similar kind. So I would like to listen from you, what is your experience and whether, that can be emulated here. So few could be, really difficult for us to change, and few things we could change. Could you just contrast, the differences in what we could address?
I like to quote one example which could kind of flutter people here. A recent example, in fact, in the morning, Professor Vasu did mention about one aspect of the, how the tubes have become a kind of a big challenge in the supply chain for setting up of any facilities, right? So people didn't even know that how these things are so different from typical pipes and stainless steel material that's going to be used in rest of the industries. They just simply blanket everything under one and they close that matter and then let everybody suffer. Similarly, when you look at the supply chain for any industry, anywhere in the world, they're all intertwined, right? There is no country in the world can say that, okay, we are, safeguarded in every aspect and we don't have to worry about anybody else in the world. So whatever happened in China today in solar, it's actually, backing them back and saying that, look, you can't become a 80-90% of the world's, manufacturer and then take everybody for granted. No, it's not going to happen. So it's going to be the case. It'll always have its own dynamics and it'll keep, going up and down, and they'll have a lot of challenges as we go along. So the second challenge that we see most often is, again, a policy issue. When we go outside India and look at countries like South Korea or Singapore or Taiwan or even Malaysia or Japan or any of these places, semiconductor industry, the entire process tools, at least 30 to 40% of tools are refurbished. Nobody goes for a completely new tool to run their process. In that case, it will take maybe another two more years for the fab to be ready. Plus, it costs a lot of money. And there's also a lot of wastage that will happen. So it's not a good mathematics or economics to do that. So everybody wants to have some level of refurbished tools. But in India, we can't import any of these machines because it's already used. As by the definition, we just can't import any used machines. And there is some leeway that has come up in the recent past. That too, you have to go to MOEF, get some special permissions to import used machines and then do something about it, right? While the South Asia really is thriving on refurbished tools, and that industry alone is one of the big ecosystems in 2 ways. One is brings on these entire manufacturing cost, the capex, and second is it develops the ecosystem of people learning the nuances of building tools, running the tools, repair, maintenance in a larger perspective. And that, unless we allow that to happen, I think comparing what other countries are doing, be it China or South Korea or Taiwan or Singapore, we will not be able to catch up because, as he said, he showed the graph. It has to go, the hockey stick, right? And to really achieve that, we got to leverage all these things as part of ecosystem, not just one or two things. And that's where I would rest my point is that's a policy decision. And unless we do that, it's not going to be easy to set up even the first fab.
Nice point. See, the whole idea of bringing this, used equipment import ban, right? It was a blanket ban that was brought in just to, avoid this dumping, which is happening elsewhere, right? But then you have to relax that you cannot have a blanket ban, but you should consciously take decisions that these technologies can be imported and this can't. And that requires a little bit of thinking, right? And the bureaucracy, as we all know, doesn't want to think too much about it. So perhaps at the mission level, right, it could be the semiconductor missions, and if these fabs are coming up, and this could be a point that can be put forward to the policymakers that instead of this blanket ban, and even there is a relaxation, it's actually a deterrent. I mean, if you look at the approval track that you have to take, in order to import this, it's not easy for commercial use. So it's a very valid point that you cannot, have this black and white. You need to work on this essential equipment imports and so on. You had
one point added to that is it actually supports the local ecosystem building. The moment you allow this kind of refurbishing, right, you have to start worrying about how do I build components to refurbish this entire tool. And that's one way to really ramp up the local ecosystem to build components to build any machine making. I believe recently our minister, Ashwini said that we will also go into the era of building tools in India. And if we have to achieve or reach there, I think the first step is to really enable ecosystem to support the refurbishing tools. That will really help the industry to take on next level.
Excellent. Yeah, Rajat. The HR, and probably HR is part of the supply chain, it looks like. So it should be considered, human resources as a part of the supply chain because, without the HR, right? So none of the things that we discuss are going to, happen. And in that context, right, we already heard that we do have a gap, right? It's not about the numbers, it's about the competency that is expected from the industry, right? So this gap cannot be just sorted out by academia. It's impossible because they are in the business of training, but unless you know what they are trained for, right? There should be a collaborative opportunity there. Would like to just come back to MJ there, right? See, some of these global operators, they have luxury of, getting things done elsewhere and so on. And this is true for our local ecosystem, right? So what is your thought process, right, on this lack of competency in the manpower that we have today? And are we doing enough, right, to address that? And what is your outlook?
I think it's a global problem, but then we start approaching various outside the company to see, how we could get some support and help. But the answer which I got was like, we also have the same problem. So, seeking help from somebody was getting me more problems. So we had the strange situation where our customers started poaching our employees. And then the so-called some new players who start coming into the country in the same space, they also started poaching employees. If I go and look at every single customer of ours, I will find a UHP or a CAS employee there for sure. And then also some of the players who are coming to business, they also, I'm pretty much sure majority will have people from UHP and CAS background. So I said, how do I solve this problem? And this cannot be there. Everybody's okay. If they want to, do some work, okay, I can go and, pick up some people from UHP or a CAS. And I said, this cannot go on like this. So we kind of went back to our boardroom and said, look, this is something going to be a bigger problem in the future. So today we are struggling with, okay, some 5 people leaving and 10 people leaving in a year or 20 people leaving in a year. Tomorrow we need to have 500 people. From where are we going to get this? If I have to set up one fab today, just one of the 10 utility packages, that's we talk about high purity gases alone, for a fab of $10 billion investment, you need at least about 500 to 600 technicians on site, setting up of the fab, right? I don't think even if I put together all the companies who are doing whatever that we are doing similar to us, will be able to even get that kind of manpower, trained manpower. So about a year back, what we did is we kind of opened up a, not many people know about this because we didn't want to say, okay, we are going to train people and give it to everybody, right? So we said, let's have a school, rather kind of a, typically like what a olden ITA would do. Morning, first 3 hours, they would go to a classroom session for 3 months. And next 5 hours of the day, they will actually work on the shop floor with all the machines, tools, and everything. And that's how we started developing people. Of course, again, that was people got to know and they started again poaching from that as well. I don't think our model is insufficient. Model is all there, but space is a challenge. So once we move into a bigger setup, which we are in the almost at the final stage of finalizing that, we will have a facility to really train 500 people a year to support fab ecosystem to come up.
That system reminds me of this old school ITI polytechnic based education, but we have to do it at a notch higher, right, with high tech. So normally you associate this ITI and polytechnic to be on the shop floor operation, but it can be sophisticated as you talk about, right? And
it is more relevant to our industry.
Absolutely.
It's not what these guys would get trained. In fact, a lot of ITI people come and join us.
That's right.
And they get really retrained and reskilled with us. And that's the first game any which way. Unless you qualify in this game, only then we can go into the next game of building tools, repairing tools, servicing tools. All would come from the same lot of people.
Right. Probably Sushobhan is hearing, so he'll come up with some plans. So excellent. I think this is an excellent model, and we have a similar kind of problem because we also train people, and it at least takes about 18 months for a newbie to become reasonably productive, right? At least I can expect something out of this person. And at that point of time, they are hot cakes in the market. So because I've trained them, right? So if they are gone, then, I lose everything, right? But on the other hand, we are happy that, they find a place elsewhere, but I'm not running a charity, right? So I need to get out of something out of the money that I've spent in the training. So we have gone into a similar route where you increase the input pipe, so that we can sustain. So I think that's the model everyone is moving towards.
One more point which I want to highlight here is recently, I think about maybe 2 years or so, government came up with a policy of using the CSR funds by the industry.
Right.
Let's say if today I qualify to give money under CSR, because whatever size of the company and profitability. So that money is actually can be used for upskilling your own employees. So that's a new scheme that government has come up with. So we are kind of giving this to one of the organizations, and they are in turn doing it for us to really do this activity. In a way, it's your own money. You don't have to give it to some open forum of CSR, but you can actually use it for upskilling your employees.
Excellent. Nick, you had something?
There's one thing to create something in the Indian ecosystem for the Indian clients and the Indian supply chains. What will it take to break into the international supply chain?
A good part of my time investment that I do in the I've been doing for last 10 years is about visiting various ecosystems across the world in semiconductor side. So what I saw is in the last 10, 15 years is the generations have shifted. Like, if you go and look at Europe and US, and bought some equipments for 2 decades back. None of them are in the business anymore. So the new generation doesn't know even how to build a simple gas panel also. Forget about building a tool. And that's only few tools which are still Europe is maintaining, like a DUV and UV and stuff like that. But when it comes to basic equipment, they still have a big challenge. I see a huge potential for MSMEs, and a bit larger companies from India to tap this potential. So we are working towards to see how we can go and ingrain into those countries and those ecosystems. And that's why we actually started doing business outside India to understand what's the dynamics that exist there. So we recently had our first equipment going out of the country. Rather, I'm sorry, that's a wrong statement. Getting ready to go out of the country using a semiconductor process into pharmaceutical industry. That's a kind of a tool that we are kind of getting ready to deliver it to outside India. And because the engineering skill sets in the current generation have gone down so much in Europe and other places, I think we have a huge opportunity to gain from that. So hence, to answer your question, we'll certainly have a lot of opportunity and we can do it.
And so if you take a look at worldwide presence of fabs, right? I mean, most of them are kind of mature today, right? And they are not that much clustered. If you take the US, China, Singapore, Taiwan, maybe Taiwan is too small, but some of the larger countries, they are not clustered around, right? India has an opportunity now. It's fairly greenfield, right? You could cluster it today, or you could spread it, right? From a supply chain perspective, what would you prefer? What would you advise the government?
Okay, let me share my experience of having seen different semiconductor ecosystems. Of course, as you said, Taiwan is too small a country, so then they had to be in one corner. But if you look at a country like South Korea, they start off with somewhere closer to Gyeonggi to begin with and set up the entire fab ecosystem there. But they already started off working towards a much larger fab ecosystem, which is about maybe about 500 kilometers away from that. So their own learning based on what they went through in the last decade or so has opened up a new idea for them to decluster the fabs. There's a learning that we have to pick up from other countries. US, it's again spread across. There's no one place, though it's called Silicon Valley in California, but it's really not the place where most of the fab operations happens. So same way in China, if you look at it, everything is declustered. And when I asked about why do this, this kind of phenomena exist, why not have one place supply all chemicals, gases? In fact, I came up with one model for solar fabs. I went to some of the customers in India. I said, look, why don't we have one single place, all the gases, chemicals, everything that you need, DI water to chillers to everything can be set up, and we meter and give it to you. Each, okay, Adani wants to set up a 4 giga, Reliance wants to test 10 giga, we'll meter and give you the every gas and everything, something like that, right? And nobody accepted that. And there are two reasons for that. One is the competition and the fear of having both everybody together. That's one issue. Second issue, dependence on one single area. In this era of multiple war sites across the globe, I don't think anybody would like to keep all the strengths in one basket. So given these two phenomena, I don't think in India also would go towards clusterizing to begin with, yes, because of certain reasons, but eventually it has to be spread across to make sure our risks are mitigated.